Thank you, João Carlos. And the next speaker is Professor Rudolf Oliveira. Professor Rudolf Oliveira is professor of the Department of Medicine at the Federal University of São Paulo, Brazil. And Professor Rudolf Oliveira will address the topic Evaluation of the Effect of Piridostigmina on Long COVID, Results of a Brazilian Randomized Double-Blind Controlled Clinical Study. Thank you for coming.
Sorry. Good afternoon, everybody. So I'm confused. Should I speak in Portuguese or in English? Yeah, because my slides are bilingual, so everyone, I will do it in English, but some slides will be in Portuguese, okay? I was invited to talk about our clinical trial. It's a phase 2 clinical trial, 2A, so very preliminary, that we have performed at the Federal University of São Paulo. But I decided to start a little bit different, because usually we start such talks with the science, and at the very end we say thanks to people. So like one slide, 10 seconds, thank you, all this bunch of people, and then it's over. So I decided to start telling the story, so the backstage of the research, because this could not have been done without all the team that is behind the study. And I think this can also inspire our Portuguese colleagues to see that it is possible to do such type of studies and diagnostic methods even without the high-end technology that is available elsewhere. So the backstage of the research actually starts with me, but it was in 2017 when I left Dr. Systrom's ICPAT lab and returned to Brazil. And I like very much this picture because only 3 people are looking to the photographer. Dr. Systrom is on the phone, and Aaron is asking, what is happening here? And this is a photo from 2017 while I was at the lab, and where I had all my background in invasive exercise physiology and invasive CPAT, and where for the first time I heard the word preload failure and could not understand, could not believe on what the hemodynamic monitor were seeing until I went back to Brazil and started to see the same thing. And then I double-checked all the cables, thought everything was wrong, but it repeatedly happened in our patients. So I established the pulmonary hemodynamic program in São Paulo in 2018, 1 year after I was back. And in 2020, the pandemic, COVID-19 pandemic hit us hard, and Brazil was the 3rd country in the world most affected by COVID-19. A lot of related to bad politics, but we are not going to that. And in 2020, Professor Eloara, who is key to all these studies, who is a colleague, a friend, and an excellent exercise physiologist, she started the post-COVID-19 outpatient clinic at UNIFESP because this was a clinical need. We had so many patients, inpatients, ICU patients, severe. There was no clinic that would keep looking at them after they were outpatients. So she started the post-COVID-19 outpatient clinic and started to systematically collect data. In 2021, almost, she actually started to analyze the systematic collection of the data with Professor Mariana Lafetá, and did the first study of cardiopulmonary exercise testing of Brazil, evaluating early post-COVID. So this is the first wave of COVID. These are the patients that were more severe during their inpatient period, more ICU, mechanical ventilation, more fibrosis. And this was published later on the ERJ Open Research. In 2021, we were invited to write an editorial to the Brazilian Journal of Pulmonary Medicine to give our perspective on what we should expect of the post-COVID pandemic, let's call like this, like the post-COVID patients, where we wrote an editorial to the Brazilian scientific community saying that we were going to face basically a tsunami of patients with post-viral syndrome. This was what what we were envisioning. At the same time, I was approached by a colleague that was with me at Dr. Sistrom's lab, Com, from Imperial College. He sent me a message telling me, how are things in Brazil about COVID? I said, catastrophic, it's horrible, it's horrific. He said, oh, good, because here we don't have any more, and I have an idea, I have funding. Do you want to do the research? I said, yeah. And then we did a research about GLP-1 inhibitors in the early stages, early stages of COVID-19, later published on infectious disease reports. And then came a call from the late call, let's say it like that, because it was a last minute call from the Brazilian government in 2020. It was the last term of the current, the prior president, offering money for researchers to do long COVID research. And then another important person appears among us, which is Dr. Bruno. He's a physiologist, he's a brilliant guy, and his field of research is autonomic dysfunction in pulmonary arterial hypertension. He brought the call to us and to me and said, let's do something. And I said, yeah, okay, but I cannot do it alone. It will be a lot of work. And so we made a team, and we really wrote together the grant and performed together the entire clinical study. And at the beginning, we had Dr. Ana Carolina. We sent her to the Brigham because it has passed a couple of years since I left, so I wanted her to see if anything has changed, because at that moment in UNIFESP, I was the only one to have ever seen a proper ICPAD done. She went, spent a couple of days, came back. We got Dr. Fernanda as well, another amazing young physician. And this was the team of the clinical study, of the ICPAD studies. And because of them, we are able to talk a little bit about the results of the research. So the research also had a very important contribution of patients, right? We did a public call using social media and all the patient associations from Brazil. All the activists also advertised for it. Recruitment is closed. That's why you don't see any contact information. I know there are a lot of people from Brazil watching this online. The study is not recruiting any more patients. But we proposed in our grant to do a first ICPAT in all patients with persistent symptoms, evaluate autonomic function, do muscle biopsy and neurological testing, identify those patients with preload impairment, and randomize them into a pyridostigmine arm. This is so hard to say, right? A mestinon arm, and the other arm with placebo, and then repeat ICPAT and autonomic function evaluation after a couple of weeks. The background behind this, I know at this point everybody knows, came from the concept brought by Dr. Sistrom about the preload impairment, and that there is likely a peripheral dysregulation, either endothelial or muscular or mitochondrial, that would impair systemic oxygen extraction. And that mestinon, by its way, its mechanism of function, would be helpful in increasing cardiac output, but increasing venous return and venous tonus in general. And we used this study published by them in 2022 to actually gain some insights about the potential size effect that could be found. And this study was an acute study using mestinon that found an increase of approximately 50 ml per minute in the treatment group compared to placebo. Here were 2 ICPATs done in the same day with a couple of hours between them. So we established the ICPAT protocol, and this is part of our paper that is under review. It's basically the same protocol as done at the Brigham with some adjustments for the Brazilian reality. And I think this is the caveat of every center. It's impossible to replicate completely 100% one test in another institution. You have to make adjustments based on your institution. And this is the biggest point. Don't try to replicate identically, because sometimes, for example, you have supply limitations. We don't have in Brazil the type of catheters that are available in the US. So how can I replicate identically? I can't. I have to find the best one that I have that will give the best results. And then we performed the ICPAT. So I was actually, Dr. Sistrom, back on the video that you showed. So the video that you showed is from 10 years ago. I was in the lab. And this is the video from our ICPAT lab. So it's basically the same setting. We have to adapt because we have a logistic problem to have the blood gases analyzed quickly. They are not, because you produce close to 20 or 25 blood gas samples per test, and they are crucial to the test interpretation. So we had to make them keep moving, because we don't have access to ice in the floor. And if we try first to just leave them on the bench and they started to coagulate, something is related to the syringes themselves, the one that we have available, but this is the solution that we came of. So they keep spinning until someone actually analyzes them. And arterial line, central line, and all the non-invasive parameters that we get from a regular CPAT. With Professor Bruno's help, he is conducting basically a parallel study doing the autonomic function analysis, and we wanted to be this way so he could analyze blind from us, and we are blind to him, so at the end to see if we are seeing the same phenomenon. He's doing autonomic assessment at rest, at hand grip exercise and Valsalva maneuver. He's also doing a fatigability protocol using hand grip exercise and assessment of the lower limb venous capacitance, and analyzing capacity and compliance, combining vascular ultrasound and years. And muscle biopsy, we are also performing, but the grant had a cut of 20%, because this is how it works in Brazil. They cut it 20%, so we were not able to perform muscle biopsy in the entire sample size, because this was the initial plan. You had to reduce significantly because of the costs related to it. The design that we did was actually to 40 patients, 20 in each arm. We chose 7 millimeters of mercury of radiator pressure to define preload, because in clinical practice, it's hard to get 6.5. I know 6.5 is a number derived from a cohort, or it's either you derive either 6 or 7. We decided to be more cautious and get 7, so we could include more patients. And we did something a little bit new, that it was actually to propose to the patients to get the maximum tolerated dose of mestinon. We started with 30 milligrams 3 times a day and went up until 120 3 times a day, or symptoms. So most of the patients do not tolerate this high dose. Most of them are in the middle dose. But we waited them to have side effects to give a step down, so we were sure they were on the maximum tolerated dose. And at the end, they were treated, the minimal time of treatment was between 4 to 6 weeks. A couple of them went up to 8 weeks. And ICPAT pre and post treatment. The first analysis that we did was actually describing how the characteristics of the population. So this is a preliminary analysis. We started screening 160, and here it's something very important because we had a really, really hard time to getting this study approved by our ethical committee because ICPET was something new for them, muscles biopsies, and we had also proposed the skin biopsy, and unbelievably they denied. They approved everything, but said the skin biopsy was too much. I said, okay. So we had to take it out from the protocol, and the patient's participation was surprising to us. With the study finished, we have close to 300 patients willing to participate in the study. Obviously, there is a huge screening process, and at the end, the numbers are smaller, but this is an important. Without the patients, we wouldn't be able to do the study. We started having the virtual contact of the patients, in-person screening, those who accepted based on the consent form, those who were in fact eligible to be part of the study, and at this point, we had 20 already analyzed with the ICPET, which is the analysis that I will show to you. Mostly female, 75%. This keeps in the second analysis, which is close to the end of the trial. Age is middle age, predominantly white people, and all of them had confirmed COVID because this was a requirement. And very little, so most of them had no hospitalization. Half of them had no hospitalization. Okay. Pulmonary function testing data showing that was no lung impairment. So we did not recruit patients with severe lung disease like the first COVID wave, for example. And we performed some questionnaires about the ME-CFS questionnaires, dysautonomic questionnaire, and hyperventilation. And all of the patients had at least one dysautonomic symptom. Most of them fulfilled the criteria for ME-CFS and for hyperventilation. From the invasive point of view, poor oxygen extraction occurs very frequently, as Dr. Systrom said, so this was replicated in our study with low central cardiac function, low cardiac output, and low stroke volume index as well. So compatible with a central cardiovascular limitation with systemic vascular limitation. And the right atrial pressure, really low, and do not increase during exercise. So this is all baseline evaluation, no treatment yet. With this analysis, we were able to describe at least 3 phenotypes of the COVID-19, and this is the first description of long COVID with ICPET in Latin America. So by definition, we screen preload patients. Most prevalent phenotype is poor oxygen extraction, was 94% of the sample. Poor oxygen consumption, so 61% of the sample, so it's not mandatory, and this is, I think it's an important message. You can still have a disease with a normal VO2, because we have to understand that VO2 is a byproduct. So there are compensatory mechanisms that might normalize VO2 at the end. And very few had low cardiac output, and actually most of them had a higher than normal cardiac output. They were more on the hyperdynamic field of this phenotype. They had reduced aerobic capacity in general. The VO2 was around 75%. A little bit of hyperventilation and hypocapnia by the non-invasive data. We still have to look into the invasive blood gas analysis to confirm if this is maintained in the entire cohort and with the more accurate data. The second preliminary analysis is more robust. We are close to 300 patients, 32 randomized. The study has closed screening. The last patient will do the second and last ICPET in December. Here I'm showing 18 patients treated with mestinon and 14 patients on placebo. They were, again, the trends are the same, 72% women, age of middle age, a little bit on the overweight side. And there were no differences among the two groups regarding the baseline demographics, resting, or peak exercise hemodynamics. The right atrial pressure, with the peak right atrial pressure, which was a definition of an inclusion criteria for the study, was very similar between the groups. So 3.2 and 3.4, so they have the same. I don't know if this is a measure of intensity of preload dysfunction, but they had the same amount of filling pressure of the right atrium at least. And the VO2 was very similar also with a non-statistically significant p-value and higher than 1 liter in both patients, a little bit higher in the placebo group. And then the most important part of the study, this is the delta of VO2 from the first to the second ICPET. So the second ICPET was done here most of the time with the intermediate dose, 90 milligrams of mestinon 3 times a day, and placebo, and was done around 6 to 8 weeks after the first ICPET. And we saw no change in peak VO2 comparing the two groups, which was striking to us, but at the same time, during the protocol, we had the feeling that we were seeing patients very heterogeneous in terms of exercise intolerance. And this made us come back to the preliminary data and take a closer look at the hemodynamics. And what came to my eyes was this information. So the cohort in general had a very high pulmonary vascular compliance at rest and at peak exercise as well. And what does that mean? So compliance, this is the curve between compliance and resistance. The compliance is, in simple words, is how much the pulmonary vasculature can accommodate flow when flow changes, right? The normal is usually here, the blue. It's close between 6 and 7. It rarely exceeds 8. And we found in the COVID cohort patients here, and we even found patients with 15 of compliance. And so compliance is proportional to pressure. The compliance will decrease the higher pressure you have or the higher flow you have. And then we thought that because we have so bad preload, so the filling pressure of the RV is so decreased that we might not be distending too much the pulmonary vasculature, and we might be causing a higher pulmonary vasculature and therefore decreased autonomic function of the pulmonary vasculature, because we have to remember the pulmonary vasculature has autonomic nodes, let's say like this, that are activated when the vessels are distended by blood flow. This is part of the normal physiology. And once you don't have these mechanisms, you might have some problems. And then we made this entire hypothesis that I just told you, that we might be facing patients not only with peripheral dysautonomia, but central pulmonary vascular dysautonomia secondary to preload failure. We decided to divide our cohort based on what we believe it is a normal pulmonary vascular compliance by old studies, which is normal to be below 8.6. And then we found a treatment signal. So this is not the entire cohort of the study yet, but we found a signal of an increasing VO2 of higher than 100 liters in those patients that do have a lower compliance. That means a normal pulmonary vascular compliance. So we believe that they are having their autonomic system of the pulmonary vasculature properly activated. The ones that had very high compliance, they do not respond to methadone, maybe because their symptoms are not only peripheral, but are also central, and methadone is mainly a peripheral drug agent. So these are actually the results of the clinical trial. We are about to finish and hope to confirm the signal with the bigger sample that we are finishing in December. And this whole conference was already very worth, because we already, Dr. Systrom and I and other colleagues from Yale had a plan to see if we can confirm these findings in a bigger cohort, combining all the data from all our centers. And I would like also to finish giving you a little bit of the Brazilian perspective. I think this is important for the Brazilian audience that there is online, because we have done the study. This is research fund in Brazil, and I believe everywhere else in the world. So research fund is something, healthcare fund is something completely different. So this fund to do this came from the research side of the government. It's done, it's done. There is no funding to continue. We are seeking more funding. We are looking into it, have applications ongoing to see if we can get more funding, but that's it. The study, the diagnostic tools, they are not available on the public healthcare system. They do not have codes. They are not even available they are not even covered by health insurances, because there are no codes for them in Brazil. So ICPAT, it's not covered by health insurance. The only way to do it is private, because then they will pay the full price, but health insurance, they don't even pay anything. And this is a problem, because we have established a very high-end state-of-the-art lab with a lot of money gave from the government, but we are still trying to convince the politicians that they should do it clinically, otherwise there will be a lot of patients without care. So Brazil, it's a very big country, close to America. It's very high, it's very big in territory. It's very disparate. You have very different Brazils inside Brazil. Over 210 million inhabitants. There is money. The problem is that because it's a big economy, the problem are the people that handle the money, not the money. And we have a lot of patients. São Paulo, where my institution is, has 3% of the Brazilian territory, concentrates 22% of the Brazilian population, and is responsible for 30% of Brazilian income. So the state has a lot of money, right? They can invest also. And just the city of São Paulo has over 12 million inhabitants. It's the biggest capital of the entire Latin America. So we have a lot of patients. We had several talks with the Brazilian health minister, several. It's like a dog going around his own, because every time you say the same thing, they pretend to believe, we pretend to believe that they are believing, and in the next meeting, we start all over again. But this is the point. With the amount of inhabitants that we have, we should have at least 20 centers for ME/CFS based on the international literature. Just the state of São Paulo should have at least 4 centers. Just the city of São Paulo should have at least 2 centers. We have 0 centers, officially recognized by the government and officially funded by the government, 0 centers. Our center was funded by research. So we are on a gap currently. We need funding from healthcare, so we could provide this to the patients. And we showed them this, but they did not seem to be, they seem to understand, but they don't do nothing with the understanding. So if they invest close to, this is close to 1 million euros, you would reach close to 2,500 patients, and you would be spending less than 3% of the healthcare costs of these patients if you don't provide healthcare to them. So the investments are high, but the cost of the care is higher. This is the whole point, that we are trying to convince the government that they should create the first center, because if they don't create the first, there will never be a second or a third or the 20 centers that we need. So as take-home messages, I think I would like to highlight all my colleagues and the backstage of the research. It took a decade of dedicated investigation, so I left the Brigham in 2017, almost a decade ago. I arrived more than a decade ago. And I think I like a quote that I heard when I was at Harvard, which said that lucky is when opportunity meets preparation. So I think we were ready to start once the opportunity appeared. And then the grant started, and we were able to put all the knowledge in practice. About the study design, we try to do a multi-level mechanistic investigation, which will hopefully give a lot of insights, although from the also colleagues from the muscle biopsies and autonomic function. The preliminary results suggest there are phenotypes, even within preload, there are subphenotypes of preload, and they do have all poor systemic oxygen extraction and reduced aerobic capacity. But methanol seems to work better in those who have normal compliance, pulmonary vascular compliance. And bringing our results into the Brazilian context, we need critical healthcare infrastructure. And because there are a lot of patients, the disease is a burden, the healthcare system is underfunded. And if we do all this nice research, but don't receive the next step, which is funding to provide healthcare, it will be just very nice papers that will not have an impact on the society. And I think nobody wants that. And just the last one, this is just the last one. In Brazil, we have the healthcare system, which is entirely free and public to everyone, underfunded. So there are huge waiting lines to get started. Since we did not convince the Brazilian government that it is worth creating one, we created on ourselves in moving to the private sector. So currently we run 2 programs, one in the public, which is doing the research and it's seeking for funding, and we open a private one. So for all of those watching online who wants to reach out to us, this is the way, because in the public service, you cannot reach out to us because there is a very strict referral system. You have to go to a referral pattern until you reach the tertiary center. And here, it's more free at a cost. Thank you very much.